In my last video, I talked about financial stewardship and what the Bible says about it, what scripture says about it. Today, I wanted to just list out and talk about some practical things that my family does in order to be better financial stewards and to help us save money and be content where we are at. The number one thing is remembering what's important and remembering that we are doing the Father's work with our finances, keeping that at our forefront instead of chasing after things that we want and we desire, and to really just be in the Word and praying of what Yahweh wants us to do with our finances. And remember that He is the one, He is our source that gives us all these finances. And so we need to be smart and we need to not chase after material things for attention. We need to be separate from culture that says if you buy X amount, if you buy X, Y, and Z, then you matter in the world, because that's not how, that doesn't define our worth. Our worth is defined in who God, our Father, says it is. And He says that we are beautifully and wonderfully made, and we are unique, and we are worth dying for. And so we have to remember what our worth is in. It's not in what people think about us. It's not in our looks or appearance, which fades. Ultimately, we are all going to get old and get gray and wrinkles, and we might not even survive until then. And so what really matters, and that is our relationship with Yeshua. It's our relationship with God, our relationship with those around us, and making sure that we have our priorities straight. That kind of leans into those material things as well. Now, I love to make my home beautiful like the next person, and there's nothing wrong with buying things. However, it's when it goes against your budget, it goes against how much you have. If you are not spending your money wisely, then when you buy those extra purchases, it makes it so much harder. And so the number one thing that I do is, when it makes sense, do it yourself or buy secondhand. And I say when it makes sense because sometimes do it yourself projects are actually more expensive than just buying the item itself. So doing it yourself when it makes sense, when you already have the materials, instead of just going out and buying whatever it might be. But again, caveat, if it's cheaper to buy it already made, do the financially responsible thing here. And buying secondhand, I love to buy my clothes secondhand, or a lot of my clothes are either bought secondhand or they've been gifts. If I bought them secondhand, majority of the time, because I'm a tiny person, now I know you can't tell from the video, but I'm 5 foot and I weigh under 100 pounds. And so that makes me a very tiny person. And so when I order things on like ThreadUp, which I love, oftentimes they're too long or they might be a little too baggy around the waist. So in order to make them fit, I do number 2, which is mending, sewing, learning how to do those things. I've been sewing for almost 13 years now. And I mean, a little longer if you count when I first learned to sew, but I've been sewing pretty frequently for the last 10 or 12 years. So learning how to sew has been extremely beneficial for me, because a lot of the dresses that I own, which cost $100, $150 online, I got secondhand via ThreadUp, almost brand new. And I was able to hem them and take them in because of the fact that I know how to sew. And I have a sewing machine that my mom gifted me about 11 years ago, as old as my son, basically. I think that it's an important skill to know, especially so that you can fix things instead of just throwing them away. You can make old clothes that are worn out into rags, but if they have a small hole or a small, tear, you can fix them as opposed to just throwing them away. And I think that that's another thing, is we need to take care of the things that we already have instead of constantly going and buying new things. I think that organizational things are the perfect example of this, because I have so many baskets throughout our house, so many baskets, and I have decluttered, and so we haven't been in need of a lot of the baskets. some of them, but not too many. But I still have the baskets in a closet just in case at some point, and I know, the minimal mom will get on me about this, but, you don't want to be just in case. But when you already have baskets and at some point you might use them, I just keep them up in a closet. And eventually, over time, I have needed them. I just like to use what I already have, and I will not be purchasing any more baskets. And I hope my husband believes me on that because I do like organizational things. And it's harder when you see all the social media on, oh, look at all these clear bins and everything. And it's harder to just use what you already have, but it's important to do that. The third thing is having a budget, and with giving and savings going out first and then living off the rest. So this takes care of what we talked about in my previous video of the financial stewardship and what we're called. So we're called to give and we're called to plan for the future. And so giving and savings need to go out first. And once they go out, then we need to live off the rest of it with, living below our means, with housing, with food, with, all of those different things, and trying to be creative of how to do that. That way you can save and you can plan for the future. Living below your means, don't buy things you can't afford, and unfortunately now I used to follow Dave Ramsey pretty up closely until the reality of our economy really has kind of hit me in the face. And we've had a pretty hard financial year. So I'm not 100% against debt, but I am against taking debt without a plan to pay it off quickly. Making sure that we're not doing things just for the notoriety, just for the attention, but because we really need them. Then also planning to tackle that debt and pay it off as quickly as possible to reduce the amount of interest that you pay. I think that's super important. And so that's where we're at right now. Is we had a very hard financial year with the foundation and our car both going out. And so we needed a reliable car, and we also needed our foundation fixed. The foundation fixed, we can't help. That has to be done, or else our house is going to fall down. And so we did that. And then also with our new car, it is not a new car. It is a used car, but it's a used, reliable car that is not going to need a million fixes like our last used car. So there's kind of a give and take. You have to do what's wise. And we have done the whole pay for a used vehicle in cash, and it's really come back to bite us. And so for this car, we did take out debt, but we have a plan to pay it off very, very quickly. And once we do that, then we're going to be saving that payment for the next vehicle that we might need to buy. The next one is identifying places where you're using material things for comfort versus trusting in the Father. And this is hard. This is so hard because it's hard to identify. It's hard to know when you're doing this. And I didn't even realize that I was doing this until a couple months ago when my husband and I started on this kind of elimination diet. And I took out the sweets. I took out things that I, would eat regularly. And I didn't realize that I was comfort eating because when I had some hard things happen to me, just some stresses, I wanted to just eat carbs. I wanted to go eat bread. I wanted to go eat sugar and sweets. And I never realized it. And so sometimes it's not until we take things out that we realize that we were really depending on them for comfort instead of being comforted in God and trusting in God and what He has provided. So making sure that we identify where we're using those maternal things. It's hard, but it is a real thing. The next one we're starting to go back to as a family now that we are starting to pay off some debt, is focus on things that you can do for free. Library books, you can rent videos at the library, going to parks, or budgeting for those fun things and really keeping to that budget. And this is hard for us. It's hard for us in the eating out bucket because we really like eating out once a week. But we're really starting to have to pull back on that, especially because my husband's health. He can't really eat out anymore. But ultimately, like, making sure that we stick to the budget is so important. And that it really just brings in that self-control, and asking God for help for that self-control to help you learn. And you're only going to gain more self-control by practice. And it might not be easy and it might not be perfect, but over time, that practice, it will come. Learn how to meal plan with ingredients you already have. Most recently, I planned my meals around Julia Pacio's, I'm sorry if I'm messing up your name, 48 meals for $20. And the reason why I chose this video is because I knew my kids and my husband would eat it. And the ingredients were I had most of the ingredients in our house already. So it was actually under $20 because I already purchased the ingredients. So meal planning with ingredients you already have, with meals that your family will eat. Now, I've tried so many times new recipes, things that I want to try, but my family just did not like. And so if we reduce our cost for a time, especially as we're kind of trying to get on track financially, is don't worry about repeating meals. Just make things that your family will eat and enjoy, because ultimately then you will not be wasting that food. And for the most part, we eat the food that we have in our fridge. We don't have an overabundance of waste. And that is very important to me. I don't want to be wasting that, especially with grocery prices the way that they are. The last thing is something that I started to do in January for my low buy, no buy month. And if you have not seen that video, I'll put it somewhere up here. And this is writing a list of things that you think you need, but really want, and not coming back to it for a few days, weeks, or a month. And then when you look back at it, you can say, oh yeah, I really do still need that thing. Or no, I was able to use something I already had to fulfill that need. And so when you tell yourself no, and when you put it on pause, it's not a no completely, but it's just a not right now, you will be amazed the amount of creativity that comes with that. So, like we were talking about containers earlier, what if you used some shoe boxes that you had? What if you used other things that you already had in your house and you just repurposed them in a different way? You know, do you really need new paintings right now, or is it something you can buy secondhand? You know, there are just things that if you don't allow yourself just to go straight to Amazon or straight to Walmart and buy it, you can see how creative you get. And it's really important when we are talking about, you know, financial responsibility, to stop chasing after the things that we think will make us happy, because ultimately they might make us happy in a moment, but then the next day we want something different. And the cycle doesn't really end until you end it. So I think being financially responsible and being a good financial steward for Christ is, like Paul has said, being content wherever we're at, with little or with much, you know. And if we can be content there, then we can be content in any situation. And ultimately, as we have found out this year with the economy, you know, really straining budgets, we can get by with a lot less than we think. And God will provide our needs. He provides all of our needs: a house, clothes, food in our belly. And we just need to remember that we're living for God, we're living for Christ. We're not living for ourselves, and we're not living for our wants and our needs. We need to be living for the needs and wants of others, and that requires sacrifice. I hope that these tips helped you. This is kind of some stuff that I do. If you have any tips, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much for coming along for this conversation, and shalom, shalom, friends.